So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this EuroTech Universities Alliance event on designing a resilient Europe. We're very happy to have you. My name is Charlotte van Velthoven from Charly Speaks, and it is a great pleasure for me to be running this event and to guide you through the program. And yes, we do have a lot in store for you today. But before I come to the details, I'd like to run you through a couple of practicalities in order to ensure a smooth running of the event. Well, first of all, you would need to know that your microphones are muted by default, so we cannot have your oral contributions. But of course, we're really looking forward to seek an active engagement with you, and we are going to facilitate that via a chat function. So on your right-hand side, you find three different tabs. You find chat, you find the Q&A, and you find the polls. We will be using the Q&A to take all your questions on board that you will have for the speakers that we have on board also for this webinar. The polls will be used only once, and I'll indicate to you when we will be using that, because we will be hosting an award ceremony regarding a photo contest that the EuroTech universities have held. Also, I'd like to point out to you that this event will be recorded. And finally, if you would like to engage with us also apart from this platform, you're more than welcome to use the hashtag #DareEU, which stands for Designing a Resilient Europe. And we're looking forward to your comments there as well. So ladies and gentlemen, why are we convening here together? Well, there's a reason for that. Designing a resilient Europe. But what does that really mean? Of course, 2020 is an extraordinary year for all of us because currently we are facing a health crisis. But one says, never waste a good crisis. And we all know that innovation is the key to get out of this crisis. And I think also that technical universities, universities of science and technology, have a specific role to play to ensure that we can get and emerge out of this crisis in a very strong way, and that we turn those challenges into great opportunities. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, we have brought together quite an impressive list of speakers from industry, from academia, but also from the EU institutions. So we will be discussing driving systemic change. We will be discussing how to empower entrepreneurs, and finally also look at technical sovereignty, whether that is a good thing, yes or no. And ladies and gentlemen, we also would like to mention that this is something we would like to formulate in a very concrete way, because the EuroTech University Alliance would like to draft some recommendations that can serve as input to ongoing policy discussions. So that's it from my side for now, and I'd like to hand over, first of all, for the welcome address to Benoît Deveaud, who is the Vice Provost for Research at École Polytechnique, but also the Chair of the EuroTech Governing Board, and he will actually take the floor on behalf of Thomas Hofmann, who couldn't make it today, but he also left a video statement that we will be posting on YouTube for you to have a look at afterwards.
Dear Commissioner Breton, dear members of the European Parliament, dear honorary speakers, guests and friends. As the President of the EuroTech Universities Alliance, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to this high-level event. Today I'm sending you warm regards from my office at the Technical University of Munich, while I would have much preferred to address you in person in Brussels. We are experiencing an extraordinary year that has challenged us in many ways, with the global health crisis, economic distress, and many changes in our personal and professional lives. Dealing with COVID-19 has pushed us out of our comfort zone and motivated us to find creative solutions and flexibly explore new fields of action. The work of our alliance has not slowed down in times of crisis. Quite the opposite. Challenged by adversity, we are now looking back on many success stories, such as quickly adapting to virtual teaching across our partner universities, with an entire online semester in the summer of 2020, and innovative hybrid formats this fall and winter. And we are proud to have been successful in the European Universities Initiative of the European Commission. This November, we will launch the EuroTech Engineering University and jointly make it our firm goal to shape Europe's engineering education of the future. Our innovative approach is to build an open campus, bringing our students together, connecting them with the wider society, and looking at technologically inspired value creation in a new collaborative and holistic way. Our partner-strong research and innovation trajectory has brought us success with the EU's Horizon 2020 program. Together, all 6 EuroTech partners have managed to receive more than 1 billion euros of funding. This allows us to put extended research and innovation efforts to the benefit of our society. Looking forward, I'm convinced that EuroTech's excellence in research and education, entrepreneurial spirit, and dedication to technological innovation can truly make a difference. And this excellence and responsibility of our talents is urgently needed to support the fight against COVID-19 and its manifold future implications, and to enhance the technological sovereignty of Europe in a world that is facing a new era with breathtaking changes in science, economy, society, and political shifts from the world of free trade to a new protectionism a la America First and a new Chinese era. EuroTech can build on its collective intelligence to deliver on the new demands for future education and continuing professional qualification of talents in rapidly changing labor markets. EuroTech comprises unique strength to address major societal paradigm shifts with declining acceptance of new technology and an increasing census for sustainability. These present new historical challenges, but opens lots of opportunities for the transformative power of the EU's Green Deal on innovation processes, on products, services across the various technology sectors. For today, we have prepared a great program for you to jointly discuss how to design a resilient Europe that emerges stronger from the crisis. In the name of the EuroTech Universities Alliance, I would like to thank all the speakers to give this program its vital impetus. I want to invite everyone to explore with us new ways on how to turn the current challenges into new opportunities for Europe and the world. Be inspired, and thanks for attending.
Mr. Deveaud, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Merci Charlotte. Dear Commissioner Breton, dear members of the European Parliament, dear presidents of the EuroTech Universities, dear speakers, dear guests, dear friends and colleagues, as Charlotte just said, I'm taking the seat here of President Thomas Hofmann, who is the president of the EuroTech Alliance, and due to technical difficulties, we were planning to send the video, and as Charlotte was saying, the video will be in the minutes. So we decided that I might read the text that Thomas Hofmann has been preparing, but instead of that, I will try to have my own words on the main ideas that he had prepared. As Charlotte was saying, we are living a very difficult time. And first of all, I would like to hope for you that you and your families are in good health. Although I know that because of the spread of the pandemic at this time, it might be that you know people who has been infected by this COVID-19. And in fact, the pandemic has brought all of us out of our comfort zone, and in particular, the universities. But despite of this, we have been trying to react and to have creative solutions and allow us to explore in fact, the flexibilities of our institutions in order to provide virtual teaching to all our students and to face the difficulty of reorienting all the courses that are happening now online. So we are very thankful to all the members of the universities that they have been so successful in doing this. At EuroTech, we are also proud these days of having been successful with our EuroTech European University Initiative that has been successfully funded by the European Union and that will be launched very soon. And the idea of this initiative is basically to foster the European engineering education of the future. One of the main ideas we are trying to develop is the idea of an open campus. And in this open campus, teachers, students, and the wider society will be provided means to meet together and to discuss the different opportunities. If I'm now looking backwards, over the whole of Horizon 2020, the partners of the EuroTech Alliance have been able to raise up to 1 billion euros in European funding. Now, if we are looking forward, in fact, we feel that we do have a responsibility in our main three tasks, which are research, teaching, and innovation. In research, as in the past, we will try to carry out with the best research, and in particular in these times of COVID-19, the issues about trying to help with solving the pandemic. But also we will try to find interesting solutions for the technology transition and the Green Deal. In teaching, trying to coach the best students to allow them to adapt to this new world, to explore with them new challenges, and also for us to find new ways of teaching. In innovation, we also are trying to evolve and coordinate the actions over the whole of Europe and to share our best practices. We are in fact convinced that the EuroTech Alliance possesses unique strengths which will allow the Alliance to face the new challenges of these times. And we are sure that we will be able to address the major societal paradigm shifts and to build upon the existing collaboration within this new European institution, and in particular to build upon the Green Deal. To conclude this short speech, in the name of all the partners of the EuroTech Alliance, I am very glad to welcome all our speakers today and to thank them for their time and patience. And let us work together to explore new challenges and find new solutions for the best of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deveaud, for your very kind opening words. And indeed, what you said, you see the technical universities as real solution providers, and definitely you want to be the best and find a solution to get out of this crisis. And now it is also my great honor to turn to the European Commission, because we have amidst us, and this is really a great pleasure and honor, EU Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton. And if someone is well placed to give a keynote here, it's definitely Mr. Breton, because you have experience within academia, you have experience in industry, and now you are one of the top men within the European Commission, also negotiating and discussing new policies regarding enhancing tech sovereignty, for example, but also focusing on the green and digital solution, which are very key to this event today. So, Mr. Breton, thank you so much for joining us, and I'd like to give the floor to you.
No, thank you very much, and I'm extremely happy to be with you. And since to remind my academic life, I could never forget that I have been myself the president and the chairman of one of the technology and science university in France for many years. So that's, you can imagine how happy I am to be with you today, even if, of course, unfortunately, we do it using video systems, but this is now what we have to get used to it, unfortunately, and probably for still some time. I do believe that universities have definitely an important role to play more than ever, and to innovate our way out of this crisis and come out stronger and more resilient. It has always been the case, of course, in the history of the evolution of our societies over the past centuries. So more than ever, we need to look at universities to give us the direction, and especially in our science and technology universities to give us the direction where we should go. Coming back on the COVID crisis, and of course we're in the midst of this global pandemic, and we need to get used to, unfortunately, for some months, maybe semesters, to live with it. We all know that, but also we have to take in consideration two very important transition, of course, the Green Deal and the digital transition. First, to tackle climate change, we have to transform the way we power our world, the way we produce our goods and services, and we know that it's a very, very deep transformation. And here, of course, we will need to innovate, we will need to invent, we need to be smart, and we will need to use more and more science and technologies. This is also true, of course, with everything we will have to do with the digital transition, and we know that here, of course, the skills of the engineers that we will have to hire are absolutely tremendous, and that we will need to focus on these skills. And we know also that we need more and more of these engineers in Europe. I keep telling this, especially also for the young ladies. I think it's a fantastic opportunity when you're a woman to go in science, to go in technology. We need more than ever all the resources we could have in this area. A few things I would like to say about our digital sovereignty and resilience. So, of course, as I said, we always have to learn from a crisis, and of course, this one with the magnitude will definitely change a lot of things for us, but also will probably accelerate the trends that we already had identified before. And what are these trends? At least at the Commission, the trends were, of course, as I mentioned it, green transition, and of course for us it is a Green Deal with everything behind, and we are ready to spend a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money for that, because when you can imagine that we have been able to put together at the Commission extremely quickly 750 billion euros that we will borrow again. So if we borrow, it means that the former finance minister who speaks, of course, you need to reimburse the debt. So we need to make sure that this will be well invested, and because at the end of the day, we know that it will be the next generation which will have to pay for this. So we have to make sure that the investment that we are making will create, of course, value, of course, for our environment and climate change, which is so important, but also, of course, for our economies. And this is also true with our digital transition. By the way, we will spend 20% of the recovery fund in digital, at least, which is a lot. So we will never spend as much at the level of the EU for that. More than 150 billion euros, which is a big number. So of course we try to push important project here. I'll come back on this in a few minutes, in order to build what the Chancellor Angela Merkel is calling our digital sovereignty. But also we learned during the crisis that our resilience was absolutely important. We have been exposed to some European vulnerabilities, of course, and of course in health, in medications, in specific product. So we knew already that, because when I presented the industrial strategy of the EU before the crisis, we had already identified that we must probably enhance, reinforce some of our supply chains. But of course, the pandemic has definitely demonstrated that we have some weaknesses here. We of course, let's be clear, we will not do everything in Europe, but we have just to reinforce some of our supply chain here. So coming back on the digital sovereignty, and I would like maybe to spend a few minutes on this. because that's extremely important for me. We have identified again some very important projects in order to build, let's say, the pillar of this digital sovereignty. And of course, in these universities in Europe will be definitely a key players of the Commission and also, of course, of our companies in order to help us to achieve these goals. The first one, of course, is computing power. We know that we need computing power, and without computing power, and especially HPCs, supercomputer, forget about digital transition, forget about AI. So Europe will invest 8 billion euros in few semesters, so very, very quickly, to develop supercomputers among the top 5 worldwide, and take the first step towards also quantum computers, which is extremely important. And we are already here through the Quantum Manifesto, but also with other projects, we are ready to invest a lot here to make sure that we'll be able to offer our engineers and scientists and PhDs, but not only, having everyone the ability to work in it and to get used to it. The second thing is, of course, developing a secure European cloud for industrial data. We all know that, let's be frank, we missed the first wave of data when it was related to personal data, that's for sure, because, of course, our market was not integrated. It was too diversified, too fragmented. It was not the case in the US, it was not the case in China, and this is how you have seen big platforms based on personal data, let's say, explode over the past decade. To build a personal data platform, it was not rocket science. I'm talking to scientists, I'm an engineer myself, but you needed to have an integrated market, you needed to be very good in marketing, and then, of course, the rest was, of course, made on innovation and entrepreneurship spirit. But now we are talking of something much more complex, which is the industrial data revolution. And here you need more technology, and here you need more technicality, and here you need more expertise, because we know that the latency is not the same. We know that, of course, the criticality of these clouds or industrial clouds which will support this industrial data are not the same. The KPIs are not the same. Cybersecurity constraints are not the same. So in other words, we thought it was very important not to miss the second wave of data, which is industrial data, by the way, which will be much, much bigger than the first one, much bigger. We expect, again, the number of data created through industrial data to double every 18 months on the planet. Today we have 40 zettabytes of data. That's our let's say, our legacy. But we will double this amount every 18 months, and most of this will come through industrial data. Will come, of course, from connected car, from digital twins, factory, was edge computing, and everything. And this and IoT, of course. But this will create a huge need of being able to host this data, and of course to create the kind of applications where we'll be able to create value and to add value on edge. And that's why we have decided to launch this Alliance for Industrial Cloud, where we will help, of course, private company to invest together, because we know that we need a lot of R&D here in order to make sure that we'll be able to provide what we need for Europe. And by the way, we don't find any solutions today in the world for what we need, because we are very demanding for our companies. And we know, by the way, that Europe is the first industrial continent, and that's definitely why we will create probably the largest number of industrial data on the planet. And we need to make sure, of course, that this will benefit our companies. That's my job, at least, as a commission. So this is what I'm doing. The third pillar is connectivity, because definitely we need to be connected. We need to have. We are already very connected in Europe. It's one of the best places in the world, using networks, fiber networks, and so on. But we may need also maybe some low orbit satellite constellation to make sure that we'll be able to provide connection everywhere in Europe, including, by the way, using quantum technologies for encrypted communication or transfer of data. That's the third pillar. And I don't want to miss also the fact that we believe that behind all this, we need more and more microprocessors, more and more chips. And of course, we need also to make sure that we can have what we need in Europe, including using below 10 nanometers technologies. So that's basically the pillars of what we will build. And you can imagine, as an engineer, as scientists, as technologists, how excited I hope that 𝐬𝐨 will be with all these projects, because we will know that at the end of the day, we all know that we will need your universities to support it. And by the way, that's a tremendous also opportunity for young generation to find jobs. Very exciting. It's fantastic to be. Of course, we have to cope with this very difficult situation for the pandemic. But when I look at all the projects we are describing, it's good to be an engineer these days, a young engineer. So I hope that we will be able to give the appetite of a young generation to go in science and technology. Because by the way, it's also a good way to find a job. We need skilled people, skilled engineers. We have today more than 500,000 unfilled positions in big data and analytics. We need 500,000. I say that. We need 300,000 cybersecurity experts. That's open positions. And we will need more and more engineers, of course, in encrypting technologies, quantum technologies, and everything such as cloud architect, cloud engineer, security specialists, and so on and so on. So a lot of potentiality, a lot of open position, and together with my colleague Nicolas Schmidt, the commissioner for our social education, we will definitely we have decided to launch the Pact for Skills, which is to sit together with all the ecosystems involved, let's say automotive industry, aircraft industry, tourism industry, health, and try to see what are the skills that we need to fulfill this twin transition I was talking about, the green one and the digital one. And of course, it's not exactly the same when you are in the tourism ecosystem or in the automotive ecosystem. So we are doing this ecosystem per ecosystems, and in discussion, of course, with all the partners, SMEs, big companies, academic world, R&D centers, and so on, and of course unions, NGOs, and we are discussing to try to define the right path in terms of skillings, which will be, of course, extremely important to be able to fulfill our ambition here. So finally, I want to repeat that we need to help scientific and technological breakthrough that start at universities to finish at the market. And there are various pathways here: licensing, creation of spin-off, to name just two. And of course, here also, UNEM is absolutely essential to advocate for tech transfer and engage with industry and think about the impact. So I would, if you allow me, I will maybe encourage you to do three things, basic things, but not maybe always easy to do. But the first one, of course, is to strengthen links with your local startup ecosystem, especially the SME. I know you have all this in mind. I know that you are doing this. I was myself the chairman of a university. I was spending a lot of time with SMEs, and this is something that you were not expecting or waiting for me to tell you that. You know, I know that you do this, but it's more important than ever. This is just one I wanted to mention it myself. Secondly, of course, to reinforce your technology transfer department, that's for sure, in the same spirit. And third, track your progress in terms of number of license agreement concluded, spin-off created, patent applied also. Patenting is extremely important more than ever. And of course, that's some good KPIs to follow in order to see how you can progress and go in the right direction. Because at the end of the day, everyone has to progress. Myself, you, and you need to be measured. And myself, it's easy because it's the parliament. The parliament is always measuring myself. Media are measuring myself. Sometimes it's unfair, but I believe, but it's good to be measured. So you need also to find the right tools to be measured and to be able to go to this ambition. So finally, of course, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that we have, for the first time in our history, engaged at the Commission level with a very, very big amount of money, and that we will, of course, we will review now within the next few weeks. Starting now, the recovery programs from each member state, and I was really pushing so that in this recovery plans, again, as I said, we will have a big part of it which will be linked to digital investment. That's absolutely critical, including in trainings, of course, and talent pools, I will say. So we will make sure that this is what we are requesting every member state, that in order to provide the resources, that we will give them back. We would like to make sure that, of course, they follow this recommendation. First, of course, the Green Deal, and we expect at least 37% of the investment being made in the Green Deal. And second, of course, the digital transition, where we expect at least 20% of the be invested in digital transition, including, by the way, in training. So that's basically what I wanted to tell you. Again, in the ecosystems, we organized just to make sure that we follow the progress of our industries within the all internal markets. All universities are present, because I know maybe more than anybody how important are universities, and especially science and technology universities as the key drivers of each of our ecosystems. So thank you very much. I wish you the best for this extremely important day today, and I was extremely happy to be able to do it almost live. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Breton. It was really, really helpful and such an integrated approach. And many of those points we will be able to take on board during the different sessions that we are now going to host. And perhaps it would be nice just to spell it out for you once again, ladies and gentlemen. 3 important points made by Mr. Breton. Link with the local ecosystem. Secondly, to reinforce your tech transfer. And finally, also to track your progress when it comes to licensing, but also the creation of spin-offs. And of course, some of the other things that were mentioned regarding more engineers, skills, for example, but also to look at the different vulnerabilities that we have encountered during the crisis. These are things that we will definitely be discussing during the upcoming session. So once again, thank you very much, Mr. Breton. So ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving then to the first panel session on driving systemic change in a post-pandemic world. And as you know, well, the pandemic has affected our daily lives, because otherwise we would have met personally and physically, probably in Brussels, and we need to cope with the crisis that we are facing. So we have been exposed to various strengths, but also to a couple of weaknesses. But what can we learn from this? I'm sure there will be many good takeaways and messages that we can bring forward in order to create a more resilient Europe. And to seek these kind of opportunities and to reap the benefits, these are things that we would like to discuss with 4 people that we have selected for this panel. And in preparation, we have asked those panel members to make 2-minute statements so that they can already give a brief overview of some of the main points where they see how we can get out of the crisis in a good way. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to mention once again, please come up with your questions within the Q&A. We're very happy to take them on board. So the first person I'd like to ask to give a brief statement is Martin Vetterli. And he's the president of the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. So Martin, if I may, I'd like to ask you to make your statement. Martin, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Perfect. Thank you so much. Great having you on board. May I ask you to make your brief 2-minute statement regarding how to drive this change, and especially from your vision as president of the EPFL. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Sorry for the glitch. I had to restart the application. So much for technology. What I would like to say is that if there was a stress test on the system, it certainly was the COVID-19 crisis, in particular stress test for digitalization, the use of the sort of technology we are using now here for the call, stress test on development of vaccines, so cutting edge life science research, and the stress test in general for organizations like our universities, but also for our societies. Now, I think what we can say is that Europe, despite the fact that we are in the middle of the second wave, so I don't want to presuppose too much about the outcome of the crisis, but still, so far, Europe has been relatively resilient as compared to some some other countries or continents. And in particular, the schooling system, which is based on a high quality public education system, I think has shown more resilience than some other countries I can think of. I think it has been also, of course, it has also shown the importance of institutes of technology, or in general, universities of science and technology, like the ones aligned around EuroTech, to take just one example of an alliance in Europe. And I think this really shows the importance of and the role, the central role we play as institutes of technology in both being research universities, where we have cutting edge research that is totally aligned with our teaching mission, and the fact that, of course, we are very often also producing some of the innovations that are transferred into industry, into startups, and so on. So I don't want to belabor the point, because I think I'm preaching to the choir here. But in some sense, I have this exercise also to talk to politicians. And, I have to say 2020 is an easier year to talk to politicians about the centrality of science and technology. So I'm not saying, never waste a good crisis. And, I'm of course not happy about all the pains that is inflicted to societies because of the crisis, but it has shown the importance of science. And certainly it is recognized in Europe. And you might have seen the statement by Angela Merkel, who, unlike some other presidents I could think of, is a scientist. And she said, well, of course, it's an exponential. Everybody knows what an exponential is, right? Well, I think Angela Merkel knows. Maybe somebody that is hanging on to a position in the US doesn't quite know it. And I'll end up here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Martin. And I think, it's not a problem that, at least to preach to the already converted, so to say. Sometimes we just need to underline that science is super important, and this is something which is definitely seen in the current crisis. So thank you very much for that. Eugenia, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, I can. We are looking forward to also have your 2-minute statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the topic is designing a resilient Europe, and I will say a few words on the way forward, because I think Europe is better than its reputation, and we have a tendency in Europe only to focus on the weaknesses, but also journalists and politicians, they tend to underestimate Europe. And what we have seen over the past years was basically that Europe was able, or has proven, quite resilient and survived several crises, including the Euro crisis, the refugee crisis, Brexit, and now Corona. So I think we need to rethink or to reinvent Europe, in a way that it can become a more resilient and competitive, especially in the technological sector. So, and I'm going to leave basically three messages how Europe can use this crisis or the pandemic to strengthen its role in the world. The first one is Europe needs to act as a smart power allied with agile governance models. What do I mean by this? So we have the problem that in many issues the EU is not able to act as a cohesive and coherent actor. So, and this also leads to this problematic that united we stand, divided we fall. So Europe needs to speak with a single voice and find common joint solutions to surpass this crisis. Europe also needs, and this is the agile governance mode level, needs to introduce different modes of governance that include civil society, members of science, so the academia, the business sector, and so on. So here we need to rethink and new modes of collaboration, basically public-private partnerships. The second sector interlinked with EuroTech is a European recovery plan for science and future-oriented technologies. So rethink the EU budget. And by this, I mean basically to shift the financial funding for new economic sectors, including new technologies, and also focus more on research projects across the borders. The third area, or the third message linked to the second one, is knowledge transfer, strengthening the role of technological universities in Europe. I think that EuroTech can take the lead in this area in terms of offering and providing innovative solutions for global challenges at the intersection between politics, education, society, and technology. And more important is also that EuroTech universities identify new research areas and provide the incentives to have more innovative education and research initiatives in the European continent. So basically, my message is that Europe needs to move from a technological laggard to a technological leader, because right now the competition occurs or happens between China and the US, and Europe is not really playing a role in this area. In a nutshell, I think that Europe, one of the way forward can be basically to find new ways of interacting, learning from the private sector, how quick they reacted to flexible ways of working and acting, and also very importantly, to take the citizens with when we implement new policy measures at the European and national levels.
Okay,
Thank
Eugenia,
you.
thank you very much. That's quite an agenda, I must say, but very concrete points. And I think definitely those policymakers that are also listening into that, very important to take that on board, but also for the universities themselves, right, to make something out of this agenda and to really ensure that Europe becomes this real technological leader in the world. So the next person I'd like to ask to make a contribution is Sebastian Pfotenhauer. He's the coordinator of the Scalings project, which is a Horizon 2020 project. He's from the Technical University of Munich, and we're also happy to have you on board. Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I'm glad to speak after my colleague from TUM, Eugenia. So thanks for already these very interesting prompts for the current discussion. I am a professor of innovation research at TUM, and I am, as Charlotte said, the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project called Scalings, which was, if I'm not mistaken, the first Horizon 2020 project that included all EuroTech universities. At that point, it was still 4. And interestingly enough, it was a social science project. Not a technical project, a social science project concerned with questions of science and technology. And in the project, we look at new open forms, co-creative forms for doing innovation better. We look at that across 10 countries and 3 domains, robotics, urban energy, and AV, to enable better, socially more desirable innovation outcomes, and basically more resilient, more socially robust innovations for a resilient Europe, and hence also the connection. So what I would like to do is maybe mention 3 points, 3 things that we learned from this project that speak to this question right now of driving systemic change in a post-pandemic world. All good things come in 3, so I echo Eugenia with making 3 points. So the first point is really social science matters for scientific and technical questions. That, I think, for the universities in EuroTech is not a surprise, but for many technical and scientific contexts, it still is something that doesn't come as naturally as it should. So one thing we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic is that societal responses to scientific findings, to expert recommendations, to government policies differ tremendously across countries and places, differ tremendously across over time. And scientists and policymakers very often face controversies or even backlash when trying to make recommendation or do something. This, what we are observing during the corona pandemic, is actually very similar to what we observe in innovation. So if you think about the decade-old, by now, controversies around GMO, about the introduction of automation, autonomous vehicles, about nanotechnologies, all these societal responses and the controversies they differ across places. They will for sure come, and social science really plays a key role here in understanding why do they exist, how should we deal with them, what does this mean for questions of vulnerability and resilience, who gains, who benefits, who loses from certain types of intervention. And so there's a parallel between COVID and innovation introductions that we should take seriously. The second point is about experimentation and the experimental character of innovation. One thing that I do a lot of research on, and my Scaling colleague as well, has to do with living labs or test beds. So these kind of designated experimental spaces where we try to introduce technologies, improve them, learn about them, and then maybe scale them up towards sort of social technical transformations. And this happens across smart cities, AV, fintech, robotics, energy, you name it. But one interesting thing about COVID is that you can think about this also as a kind of experimental set of interventions, almost like living labs, right? So you have locally very different types of intervention, different rules and regulation, different types of technologies that are introduced. So who gets to introduce masks, who gets to introduce corona tracking apps, and so on. We have different boundaries of trying to contain certain things. So questions of scalability of innovation, to me, are really parallel to questions of scalability of COVID responses for all of Europe. And also here, social science can really play a key role for understanding what's going on. And the final point, very brief one, has to do with perspectives on disruption. Again, sort of the parallel between innovation and COVID. So one thing we've seen is that disruptions are certainly possible, sometimes imposed from the externally, sometimes triggered internally. But some of the technological changes that we have seen in very short time, like the transition in mobility patterns, transition in our work cultures, and and the use of digital technologies. So disruptions, in a sense, are possible, and I think there is something to understand about how much can we, what can we learn from mandated massive change or sort of organic transitions. And here really there is a question about how do we take citizens on board, or Eugenia already mentioned that. How do we make sure that all those actors are included that are being affected by these kind of systemic dramatic changes? And I guess it comes down to recognizing that disruption, if anything, shows us how much innovation is a social process that requires sort of a social responsiveness. I'll leave it with that, and I'm happy to continue the discussion in a bit.
Thanks, Sebastian, also for your very concrete points, extremely helpful. And I'm sure we'll come back later on also to this question of how to incorporate the citizen and the importance of social sciences next to really the hard technical sciences as well. But before that, I'd like to give the final word for the 2-minute opening statement to Lina Galvez-Munoz, who is the ITRE Vice Chair within the European Parliament. Well, Lina, we've also already heard from Commissioner Breton, but I'm sure you also have something to say also on behalf of your group within the European Parliament, and as your role as Vice Chair of ITRE, where I'm sure you have discussed the role of science as well, given this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you hear me now, okay?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Thank you.
I now with the mobile phone, if there's something is wrong with my computer, sorry about that before. So thank you very much for inviting me to join this discussion. Before I get involved at the European Parliament 1.5 years ago, more or less, I've been all my life economic history and institutions professor. So I have explained to my students many times the role of technical universities on innovation, on on industrial leadership and on economic development. So I'm really very happy to be here, because I think the technical universities are really the place for the knowledge triangle we really need to build, and also for this knowledge-based innovation we are really looking forward. And also, as the Commissioner Breton has said, this local and regional innovative ecosystem. Well, the COVID pandemic, as you know, is unprecedented. So it's the common response to the emergence and spread of the virus. During this time, governments, societies, and the world are struggling to contain the global pandemic. When economic suffering like never before, and our personal and professional lives have been almost totally disrupted. Research and innovation have proven to be the most powerful tool in the transition to what we are calling now the new normal, in a way. Of course, we aim at transforming Europe towards, as also the Commissioner Breton saying, towards a greener, digital, healthier, and more equal future. And for that, we rely and continue to depend on Europe's researchers to provide the talents, ideas, and projects necessary to make this happen, and also universities to educate the new actors and the new generations. We all know that the comparative advantage of Europe is not our demographic strength, is not we have cheap labor. Our competitive basis in knowledge for that is very important. We put all the resources on that. Of course, I was very disappointed with the Council conclusions of July that cutting our common budget, and especially the Horizon Europe budget. But I have to say now that after a very hard work, and a new agreement has been reached right now. Is the speaker of the presidency of the council saying that we finally has reached an agreement. Is 16 billion more, and Horizon Europe will be receiving more funds. It's obviously not the one we wanted at the very beginning, but is for the first time the European Parliament has achieved to move the agreement of the Council. So we have, I think, as European citizens, we have to be proud of that, and because we really need to look long term. We cannot look short term at all. If we really want to have this greener, digital, and healthier, more fair and fairer future. For that, we really need to invest in our young people and also in all over life, and especially we need more women to get involved in this studies and in this research and in this innovation, because it is true that I agree that innovation is a social process. I completely agree, absolutely agree. But still we need more women also designing our digital future, because it will not be an inclusive future unless we are there. And I always like to say that talents are equally distributed, but opportunities are not. So we really need to work very hard on that. And finally, it has already been said, so I will not insist on that, but we need citizens on board. We need this to increase public trust and citizens' engagement, also in order to convince them to put more resources on science and technology, because at the end are the citizens paying tax. We as citizens are the one paying tax. So we really need to get involved citizens in that process, and knowing how important it is, you know, that we are happy on putting our tax, our common budget, promoting science, technology, and technical education as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina. I really appreciate your inputs as well. And what you stated also is really start at the basis, kind of foster and promote Europe's talents and ideas, and to kind of roll that out over a longer period of time, because we can't fix anything just in one instance. And also very happy to hear that you have reached an agreement now on the MFF. I think that's very good news. A lot of people have been waiting for that. So thank you for that. Yes, then I'd like to run through a couple of questions. And one question already came in. I'll take that on board in a second. I'd like to come back to a couple of points that were made. And perhaps, Martin, you could reflect on this first. Because Eugenia said, well, basically what we need is a kind of a recovery plan for science. And Lina just said, okay, we will be having more budget for Horizon Europe. Breton already said there will be a huge recovery plan. But if it were up to you, Mr. Vetterli, how would like a recovery plan for science ideally look like?
I think it's not necessarily only more money, right? That's sort of it's a quick and easy answer. And I have to be careful because that's what people expect. But I think it's more to understand that scientists working together in a constructive way can actually solve large problems. And if I think of the vaccine development in Europe, and it's really the result of long-term investments like in the EMBL and institutions like this. If I think of the digital contact tracing app that was done in Europe, it's long-term investment in basic computer science. You only become good if you work hard for a very long time. I'm sorry to say, it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, and it's the same with funding. You have to fund in the long term, and so it doesn't work if you just say, "Oh, we are in the middle of COVID-19, let's plug down some billions and miracles will happen." That's not how it happens. That's not how Silicon Valley happens. That's not how, other centers of excellence, both in science and in tech transfer, have happened. And I think we have many of these in Europe, but I actually agree with the prior statements that the Europeans tend to be a little bit too self-critical and, sort of see the glass half full and so on. After all, we are the continent with the highest level of median education, okay? And when we look across the pond, and I spend a lot of time in the US, so I know this, we always talk about the same half a dozen or 10 universities, right? And there are 2,000 after the first 10, which we don't really consider very important, right? In Europe, we have dozens of high-flying universities with a very long tradition, a very generous public education system, and so on. And that's really what makes us resilient. Now, on top of this, of course, we need to invest. And the best way, the best time to invest is always a time of crisis, right? That's when you have to invest for the future. And I very much hope that we seize the moment. But I warn from these short-term investments, the thing that says, okay, now the only thing we really need to do is understand, whatever, the spike protein, okay? So let's, it always happens like this. It happened with HIV, it happens with Ebola and so on. No, you need a very large set of people who understand the basic science, the technology, the production, etc. The entire system has to work, and therefore, please take the long view.
Exactly. I think in that sense, you also echo what Lina said, that we need this kind of long-term view and not just those monetary investments for the coming year or the coming 2 years to get out of the crisis. Another thing that you mentioned as well, of course, we need to focus on the human capital, right? We need to invest then in the skills, in the scientists. We need this kind of ecosystems where they collaborate. But another point that was made by most of you is, yes, we have the science, but on the other hand, if we want the science to land in society, we should get the citizens on board. I'd like to know from you, but how to get those citizens on board then? And perhaps I'd like to start with Sebastian. Perhaps you have some experience to share with us from your Scalings project, how to get the citizens on board.
Excellent question. So part of the argument that I've been making is that really depends on where you are asking these questions and towards whom. I think some things work in some places and they don't work in others. I think one thing that we've learned, that we've seen throughout the COVID pandemic, is that really the societal responses, their fear, their aspirations, their predispositions, they differ very much. And so you're trying to solve different social problems with the kind of scientific or technical information or intervention. And so this really needs to be not at the end point of making a technical intervention or policy intervention, but really at the forefront of this. And just to link this to Martin's response about a recovery plan. So I think I mean it's true that we are in the midst of a pandemic, which is a crisis. And we're seeing some signs that there might be remedies for that. We heard some of the encouraging results, testing results just yesterday that are coming out of a variety of places, Pfizer, also the Frankfurt region. But there are other crises that we've been struggling with for a long time, a much longer time than the COVID crisis, the climate crisis, the crisis of trust in democracies and democratic institutions. And so it's really important to understand, to see the parallels between how certain types of authoritative knowledge have come under suspicion or under scrutiny in ways that wasn't the case before. So similar to saying, perhaps it's less a question of saying, how can we get back to an old normal, sort of a recovery from, but how can we think constructively forward? And one of the big indications that we're seeing is that this question, none of these questions, crisis of democracy, COVID crisis, climate crisis, any crisis, can be answered without being serious about dialogue with citizens. And there's a number of instruments and opportunities out there, from living labs to public engagement practices to citizen juries to what have you, open science. But perhaps more similarly and maybe specifically relevant for the EuroTech universities is that really needs to trickle down into educational processes of how do we want to train the scientists and the engineers of the future. So getting a sense of societal questions, societal responses matter for all of these engineering and technical questions, putting this into the first semester, putting this throughout the curricula of engineers and scientists is really something that we should take seriously. So I'll leave it with that. I'm sure others have something to add.
Well noted. Perhaps, 𝐸𝐸, I may ask you to reflect on that question. For you, how to take the citizens on board, because that's something you mentioned as well. You should really make them part of this whole reconstruct of Europe.
Yes, I mean, my comments go basically in the same direction as the ones by Sebastian. So what I can add on the top of that is perhaps also that, well, one step is being at the technical university. What I have seen over the past 4 years is that also engineers, they need a kind of basic literacy on decision-making processes. So that would be a first step forward, because when you develop new technologies, an engineer also has a kind of not only he or she has a responsibility towards the society in which he or she is inserted or integrated. So that would be the first step, also that engineers don't live in a kind of a vacuum, but that they understand themselves as a part of the society and that they also think critically about the implications that these new technologies can have in the day-to-day life. So that would be one important thing. And the other one, very quickly,
yes, please,
because I think you are. And the other one, what we also have seen now in the COVID pandemic, is that the willingness of citizens to accept these very restrictive COVID measures has decreased over time. So it means that basically you also need to find new ways of explaining and basically also to have more deliberative processes, like a citizen forum where citizens understand why certain measures are important for everyone in the society.
Okay, thank you. In a sense, we kind of need to bring in more democracy in a sense, and even try to have, for example, the engineers to have a better understanding of kind of the citizenship approach and what their role is in order to transfer that knowledge really into society. Because in the end, that's what it's about. Of course, it needs to land in the right places. So thank you for that. A final question I would like to take on board, because ladies and gentlemen, we're almost running out of time, unfortunately. And the question comes from Thomas Jurgensen. He first of all referred to Breton's speech because he hinted at patent application as an important KPI for universities. But to him, it sounded a little bit like the 1990s. So maybe it's better to move away from this and look at a broader impact in the innovation ecosystem. So perhaps, Lina, you could contribute also from your perspective. Would you say just look at patent applications or at the broader innovation ecosystem perspective?
Well, I think, as I said before, we should really look to in a broader sense, in a very holistic sense, taking the, Sebastian was saying, this social approach as well, because we could have very good innovations, but if later on are not applied, they are not accepted by society, that would not really help very much. So, and also I think we need to do that also within a different economic policy, because the economic policy we have been following so far, it is a financialized policy that is not really looking towards our productive system, and is not really looking to really towards our innovation and science system at all, and it's increasing inequalities. And as I said before, is not giving opportunities to everybody, because inequalities are rising and rising. Yesterday, Vice President 𝐩𝐶𝐵 presented a forecast for the European Union, where a lot of different inequalities has been rising during the pandemic. So we cannot afford that if we really want the best talents and the best ideas and the best projects to be taken into consideration in order to have this greener, digital, healthier, and fairer Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, final question to all of you, and I'd like to answer you that in only one word. I know it's a huge challenge, but what is to you really the role of the technical universities to get out of this crisis? In one word, how to do it? Martin.
Talent.
Talent. Eugenia.
Innovation.
Perfect. Sebastian.
Responsibility.
Responsibility. Lina.
Social.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think these words pretty much wrap up what you have mentioned during this session as well. I'd like to thank you very much for your contribution. Your points are well noted, and we're looking forward to take them on board into the recommendations. We would be happy to have you in the other sessions as well as contributor. But thank you so much once again for your input. Much, much appreciated. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to the next part. And as I've already mentioned in my introduction, we will at one moment in time be using the polls tab. And that moment is right now, because we within the EuroTech Universities Alliance have run a photo contest for early stage researchers. And we will now have a final voting and award ceremony. So I give you a little bit an insight to what EuroTech Universities Alliance has done. Well, the topic for the photo contest was, what does your research look like in times of COVID-19? And this question and the topic was addressed only to early stage researchers, so students, PhD students, and postdocs. So how did it work? Those early stage researchers of the 6 EuroTech universities were invited to submit up to 3 pictures. In total, there were 36 pictures, which were up to a public vote. And the 3 pictures with the most votes are now presented to you. And I think we're going to have them on the screen as well. And the picture that will win, and we will announce that shortly after we have opened the poll, will get a €500 grant. And the idea is that they spend this grant on, for example, participating in a scientific conference or subscribing to a scientific journal. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's really up to you. If we talk about democracy and a democratic vote, that is what we are going to do right now. So can I ask the organization to put the 3 pictures in there, because then I can give you a little bit of background also on those different pictures. So we have a picture on the world inside of a tangerine. And this picture is by Ali Fatangelu from the Technical University of Eindhoven. And he said, my work is to really exploit the MRI technique in order to visualize opaque multi-phase chemical reactors. This technique can help to validate the numerical modeling results of chemical reactors. I've recently started my work at the Technical University of Eindhoven to learn how to work with an MRI machine. My dear colleague Noah Romein helped me to make MRI pictures of a tangerine, which was grown inside their office. And this picture really shows the world inside of the tangerine. So that's picture 1. And now I'd like to switch to picture 2, which is the corona effect on hydrogels. And this picture was taken by Charly Speaks from the Technical University of Denmark. Shapeable hydrogels with 3D morphology have shown great technological promise over the last decades. Before corona, with the help of additive manufactured mastered molds, polysaccharide-based hydrogels were successfully fabricated with excellent mechanical strength and shapeability. Surprisingly, however, after the corona lockdown, the fabricated hydrogels showed poor mechanical strength. Although the problem existed due to expired chemicals, we assume that the hydrogels were affected by COVID-19. And then the final picture, picture 3, on sterile manufacturing by Carmen Radeke from the Technical University of Denmark. And she says, we are TMAT, which is tailored materials and tissues, and we call ourselves the tomatoes. In their everyday life, the tomatoes fabricate microphysiological platforms using additive manufacturing. But mostly the tomatoes hide in their labs. But sometimes tomatoes escape from their vine to discuss science, how the position of the stars affect the printing process or the growth of cells in future. Here we see a rare caption of this process of sterile discussion in times of corona. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the overview then of the 3 pictures that we are going to put up for a vote. And I would like to say, please switch to the poll step and you're more than welcome to cast your votes. I'm really looking forward to receiving your inputs. And of course, it's going to be very, very exciting to see who will take most of the votes. And I must say, all pictures are very, very impressive, highlighting also some of the key contributions that are being made to tackle the coronavirus. And we're going to wait a couple of more minutes before we are going to close the poll. Thank you so much. And I would say I'll just wait another 10 seconds and then we're going to announce the winner. We have another 10 seconds. Okay, I think the polls have now closed, and it is my great pleasure to announce as winner Charly Speaks from the Technical University of Denmark. Picture 2, the corona effect on hydrogels. So Charly, I think you are also live with us. Is that correct?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Charly, is that you?
Yes, it's me.
Yes, perfect, perfect. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Did you expect this?
No, not really.
Okay, well, it's really lovely because you won 500 euros to invest in something related to your research. And of course, we would be really happy to know what you will spend the money on.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much, EuroTech University Alliance, for arranging this photo contest. I'm a PhD student at Biomed Group from G2 Nanolab, and I've just started my 2nd year of PhD life. And as Mr. Deveaud mentioned in his opening speech, I am also sad to see that the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting lockdown have had a major impact on research institutions, especially universities. And because of this lockdown, as I mentioned in my photo contest picture, I had to halt some of my research activities. And after the lockdown, when I started resuming my experiments on this work related to hydrogels, which is used for making a shapeable and versatile platform for next generation sustainable energy storage devices. So what happened was that the hydrogels were not behaving the same, which had really good strength before the lockdown. They started to disintegrate and no shapeability, and I was really, really sad to see that, because it was just the final set of results to be completed and everything was upside down. And this made me to wonder, is it really the corona effect, which I have on my hydrogel as well? And even though later I was able to figure out that one of the chemical had expired, and yes, it also took some of my time, especially get the chemical replaced because of into the worldwide restrictions imposed associated with COVID-19.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
at this moment, I know that there are a lot of researchers who are facing such issues, and I would dedicate this award to them for there's something that make them happy as well, because 2020 seems to be not a year that is rememberable because of many reasons, and I'm sure that for many with a grateful spirit, there was something that made the year special. And this award, by winning this, I have achieved one of the biggest achievement of 2020, which I can remember for life. And I also would like to thank EuroTech Universities for providing this opportunity to think and make researchers do the best out of this pandemic period. And it is the only reason why I was able to submit this photo for this contest. And
Perfect. Thank
to
you so
answer your
much.
question, I would like to use this award to attend either a summer school related to my PhD project, or take a membership, which would enable me to attend some conferences in the future at a discounted rate. Yeah, thank you so
Perfect.
much.
It's a pleasure. I wish you the best of luck with your further research. And indeed, science is
thank
all
you.
about trial and error as well.
Yeah,
But I'm sure you're very persistent, and I'm happy to hear that you'll spend it on, for example, a summer school. So the best of luck. Thank you once again, Anjali.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now switching to the second panel. And as mentioned during the introduction as well, we would like to discuss how to empower entrepreneurs for a sustainable future. Well, we've heard a couple of times already that we're kind of embarking on this green and digital transition, something that we've started already before the COVID-19 crisis, but which has become even more important right now. But of course, how are we going to do that? And we need the type of entrepreneurs that need some mentoring, for example, that need some financial support, that need an ecosystem in order to kind of provide those incentives to become an entrepreneur, to become a successful entrepreneur. And we're happy to have people on board that are very much involved in doing so. And we have, again, a panel of 4 people. Whom I've also asked to make a 2-minute statement so that we have a very good idea of what I focus on. And it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Tessie Hartjes, who is the Vice President Marketing of 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻. And Tessie, pleased to have you, and we're looking forward to your input.
Hi, well, thank you very much indeed for having me. Maybe to explain a little bit, 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 is a company that is developing long-range solar electric vehicles, solar electric cars, and we have originated from the Eindhoven University of Technology. And I think that one of the main things that we, as a young company, run into is we have a big, hairy, ambitious, which is delivering clean mobility for everyone, everywhere in the world. Because the nice thing about solar cars is they can provide clean mobility without having any special infrastructure. The thing is, if you want to get to scale in such a hardware product, then you need quite some capital, and capital is not per se the problem. I think that the problem we are running into is that you need quite a long development time. So if you want to get to 10x in saving CO2 emissions in such a hardware venture, then you also need quite some capital from the early beginning, which is in a phase where there is a lot of risk. And what we have noticed as a startup is that we are we are developing something for a business to consumer market, and we've noticed that there's quite some preference in many of the financing systems for B2B models, because it's easier to judge rationally whether something will succeed from a B2B perspective than from a B2C perspective. And I just heard that it's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And if you think about that, I think that's very, very, very much true. So a lot of people have told us to change what we're doing. And in the end, it's very important that you have the right team. It all starts with the team. But what we've, sorry, there's somebody still talking.
Yes.
Okay. Can we?
Yes, I'm checking if she can be switched off.
Okay. And the last thing I wanted to say is that we have noticed, especially with some financing instruments from the European Union, you apply writing your idea, which is the 1%. But in the end, it's about the 99%. So what happens in venture capital world is you talk to the people come to your place and you talk and you see the team, they see you, they see your passion, they hear your vision, and they invest in the team. And I think that's one thing that we should change in the future if we want to have the next Tesla of Europe.
Thank you so much. So focus on those 99%, and early capital is needed as well. Thank you. We'll discuss that in more detail in a second, Tessie. Then I'd like to give the floor to Anders Bjarklev, who's the president of the Technical University of Denmark. Well, first of all, congratulations that one of your PhD students has just won the photo contest. But that aside, we're really happy to have your vision on how to empower entrepreneurs. Okay, Anders, we can't hear you.
Somebody unmuted
Yes.
me. Me. Good. Yeah, pleasure to be here, and thank you very much. I like to say that I like to take point of reference in what we do in our student facility, DTU Skylab, where we work with entrepreneurship primarily for students, but also expanding it now. I think it's very important that we start by providing our students with a solid knowledge base. I'm sure we all agree on that. Then we should, by our own example, show the importance of openness and collaboration. I also think it's very important to make it very clear to the students that we are here to help and give the directions of where they can seek the help if they need it. Then I also think it's very important to really work in a way so we induce self-confidence. And one way to do that is really to a high degree to set the students free. I think it's so important that we don't try to control what they do, but believe in their vision for the future. They're going to live it probably much more than the rest of us in my age, certainly. So I think it's very, very important that we set them free, but help them along the way and believe in them. So that's one thing. I hope I'll get back to a little bit about sustainability later, but that's a short introduction.
Thank you so much. Setting students free, and with this kind of liberal vision, you will be able to further empower them to become successful entrepreneurs. The next speaker I'd like to ask to make a contribution is Charly Schwartz, who is the Managing Director of the Technion Drive Accelerator. Charly, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Charlotte. I'm happy to be in this panel. I would like, before answering the challenge that we have, how do we empower the entrepreneurs, I would like to talk about the challenges that we have in transferring data or information or technology from university out. And I've ordered the challenges, the major challenges that I see, because I think we can address each one of them as a community of EuroTech and help get the technologies out and make impact on human beings. So the first challenge that we see in academia is the technology already mature enough to go out? Of course, we have the technology readiness level, but this is not something that is always easy to assess. And I've encountered such cases where the TRL looked great, and then we faced some issues when the company was already formed. And then if the technology is mature, what is the problem it solves? In many technologies in academia, it's a solution that is looking for a problem. And this is because the solution or the research comes from academic curiosity and not necessarily market need. And that's fine. This is what academia is for. But as in the transition between academia and commercialization, we do need to address this point and find out what is the real problem this solution is solving. Now that we have a mature technology and we know what the problem is, we need the agents or the people or the entrepreneurs that will take this out of the university. Now, I handle mostly entrepreneurs that are master's and PhD students or post after graduation. So I'll be referring more to researchers turned into entrepreneurs. And there are a lot of similarities between researchers and entrepreneurs, but there are some differences. And these differences are mostly what it requires is to do the transformation, to help the researcher, the junior researcher, transform into entrepreneur, because there are differences. And I would be happy on the panel later with questions to address that point. And finally, we have the valley of death, where we're starting. We have, and I think as a community we can help them bridge, and we can help them bridge not by its post 3, 6, or 12 months program. It's helping them after the entrepreneurship program. So we need to support them even later as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And indeed, you have very much a holistic approach within your Technion Drive Accelerator. And I saw Tessie laughing as well when you said that solutions are looking for a problem. And Tessie, we'll come back to you because we're happy to have your view on that as well. But first of all, I'd like to wrap up this few-minute statement session with Marianne Lubansky, the CEO of Science City Lyngby. Marianne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me as well. So we are a public-private partnership of more than 80 different organizations locally here in Lyngby, based around the Danish the Technical University, the DTU campus, and DTU is one of our members. But we are a huge local network, and I was happy to hear Commissioner Breton also mentioning the importance of having a local network, because we can offer two things to entrepreneurs to empower them. More than two things, actually, but at least two really important things. First of all, we have fantastic members that can offer expert advice. So, and it's not advice from research, it's market advice. So we have a lot of large corporations that are maybe working in similar technical fields as the entrepreneurs trying to develop a new company. And they can't afford consultants to give them good advice, but we can connect them with local companies that might have people working at a daily basis oh, sorry, my screen went black. Oop. We have sensors here, so when I don't move enough, they turn off the light. But the expert advice you can get from different partners, also from local authorities. So, and from citizens through living labs, future customers and such. The other thing we can do to empower our entrepreneurs is to help them get the first client, because that's the next big issue. I mean, I know, Tessie, you're looking for money, you need money, but you know, you also all dream to get somebody to buy the first car or the first component that you are developing. So that's also what we try to do, is to establish living labs and actually to handheld our entrepreneurs, to introduce them to possible partners, market partners, or simply the first test client in our local network. And then you can do that locally before you go out there. You can get a lot of feedback. So before you actually go global or you approach other markets, you have already received a lot of local feedback on your business model, on your product, how it's being used and stuff like that. That's what we do.
Okay, thank you so much, Marianne, and we'll come back to some of the points that you've made as well. Well, as said, I'd first like to approach Tessie, because you were laughing a bit about a solution looking for a problem. Well, you clearly stated we have a problem, we have a need of clean mobility, our emissions are too high, but please reflect on this.
Yeah, the funny thing is that so it's market pull versus market push, right? And this is actually quite a struggle within our company as well. I wouldn't say a struggle, but it's something we had meetings on today. A challenge, yeah. So I truly believe that as technology progresses, the new opportunities arise, and the market may not be aware yet that they are in need of these opportunities. But the most important thing is, and going back to Mariana, is talking to your customers, is talking to the market. So I remember a story of a company founded by a student, technical student, great product, but somebody had to force him to call all his existing customers and to talk to them and to learn what is your exact need. And we always tend to bring over the engineers to events with our potential customers, because we work with pre-reservations. And then there was one instance where an engineer said, yeah, I'm working on this complex algorithm, and then this person just asked me if there are cup holders in the car. But if you develop a car that can drive for 8 hours straight forward, then the cup holder is a very important thing. But easy to realize, so yeah.
Exactly, it's a nice example, and perhaps I'd like to ask Julie and Mariana to reflect on this as well, because Julie, we had a short conversation. You've already mentioned that, well, technically in beta-minded people, they're not always aware of, okay, what do consumers want? And this is something where you help them as well, right, Julie?
Right, that's correct. Typically, in many cases, the engineers are very smart, extremely smart people, but they don't understand the business in the sense of not doing enough customer discovery, which I think Tessie also mentioned before. They need to go out before writing code. I want to cuff their hands, put them in cuffs and not write code, just use their mouth and ears to go and listen and ask not family and friends, but really look at the users and at the customers. They might be different, and how the market that they are addressing is working without the regulations and so on. And this is quite sometimes a battle with them, because they think they know what the customer wants, and definitely many times they are mistaken. And so I think it has to do with the transformation that they need to do from being experts in one thing, which is mostly the technology. Again, I'm talking about more research, technical entrepreneurs, and being jack of all trades and master of none. Know so many things versus the research where you focus on something that nobody else knows.
Exactly. Yeah. So you manage them to bring them a broader skill set, and not just to focus on their tunnel vision research, but really to go out there and be receptive to external factors as well as what do the customers want, because if you don't know what they want, then probably it will be very difficult to sell your products. Related to that, Mariana, and also related to the first panel that we had, Sebastian Fortenhauer mentioned the importance also of the citizen, the social side of things, and of living labs. That living labs, they can provide a very concrete example to see if a certain technology works, yes or no. And I know when we talked before, you talked about the retail tech lab. So perhaps you can explain this example to us so that we have a better idea of why living labs are so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would do that with pleasure. I mean, in June this year, in the middle of a Corona lockdown, we opened up a living lab downtown in the trading city. So we have a university campus, and 1.5 kilometers there's like a city center, and there's a big mall in the city center, and the owner of the mall, even the pension funds that actually own the shopping centers organization that have this one mall, they offered us a room for free. So we have a kind of like a store in the middle of Lyngby Storcenter in the mall. And there we have created a living lab for startups with related technology to, we call it Retail Tech Lab. We've already by now had 36 different startups coming through our lab. We have created more than 100 leads for them, so actual customer leads among retailers, but also among shopping center owners. So and some of them are corona related. There's a lot about sustainability. I mean, these are big buildings. You can save energy. You can make use square meters a lot smarter. It's also parking solutions. It's wayfinding. It's robots. It's new payment solutions. It's of course omni-channel, and it's a very physical experience because we have an open lab there. We have the tech companies demonstrating what they do, and we have ordinary people, citizens, that are shopping. They come by and they look at this and they said, what kind of shop is this? What can you buy here? And then we invite them in, and then we have engaged with students from other universities and other educational institutions because we have actually a business school downtown. So when you have these business people connecting them with the smart engineers, you get a company that can actually both develop fantastic technology, and you have people who are interested in marketing and sales and customer analysis and stuff like that. So we have working together in the lab, and we have the real citizens moving in and out. Now we have actually tried to organize it because we're not allowed to have more than 10 people at a time. Yeah. So now we have made customer panels, and we had 40 people signing up in just 2 days that voluntarily wants to help out being a test customer in the lab. People living in Lyngby. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's a very nice example, I must say. Thank you, Marianne. And it already shows that in essence, people are very, very curious, and in a way you make very clever use of their curiosity in order for the entrepreneurs to have a better view on, okay, will this product or service be successful in the market itself? Anders, of course, I haven't forgotten about you. Well, in your opening words, you mentioned, of course, the importance of setting these students free. We could come later also to the Skylab initiative that you have, but I know that you would like to spend a couple of words also on your vision on sustainability and how you can kind of stimulate entrepreneurs to embark on a sustainable world.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlotte. I think that's very, very important, because I think if we look at our societies as a whole, we have to remember sustainability is a key thing for most people, for especially the young people are very focused. You can say basically it has also been a focus for generations, because if you talk about the first sustainability, the economic one, we're pretty good at that, and in a way so that we have economists placed on high posts in the societies. The parliaments are full of economists, and they are very highly ranked people and it is important, of course. Now you see the next generation actually is starting to say, yeah, but we have also the one with the sustainability that has to do with the resources, how we spend them, how we influence environment and so on. And I think that's a fantastic chance actually for technical universities to play a role and a key role. And we also have heard here about the initiatives from TESI and so on, where you have these initiatives that really are going to be important. But I would also like to point to the thing that I think that we as technical universities have to be very, very conscious, have a strong conscience on the fact that there's a third sustainability, and that's the social one. It is important that when we make our solutions, that we make them in a manner so we get everybody on board. There's a big risk that if we as society concentrate still on the economic one and on the environmental one, if we forget the social sustainability, and leave a big group of people behind in society without jobs, without influence, without a good sense, they will eventually not only have the power in democracies, but they will also use it to maybe overthrow the whole thing. And that means that it doesn't help to work on economy and resources if we don't take the other one with us. I also think as members of a society, as the technical universities are, we have a big obligation also to make sure that we get everybody on board, and we will have richer and better societies if we do so. So I really think it's the time now, not only to think about how we solve the environment thing, how we make a green deal or whatever, but make sure that we get everybody on board. Otherwise, we risk it all, basically.
Okay, thanks. So it should not only focus on the Green Deal, but in essence, it should also be a kind of a social deal. That's what you're trying to say as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask you, please come up with any questions within the Q&A. We're happy to take them on board. Well, to make Anders' remark a little bit more concrete, Tessie, may I ask you, I mean, you have a clear vision on sustainability, but is likely also working on this social component, or would you say that is something that we take on board in the next phase when we will be able to fully commercialize our products?
Well, absolutely. So in our case, we are targeting the electric vehicle market, and there are certain barriers. And one of the biggest barriers so far for customers is costs. So electric vehicles are expensive. What we do is we focus on delivering a very efficient electric vehicle. And the battery is 1/3 of the cost price of an electric vehicle today. So it's the most expensive component from this vehicle. So far, initially, range was a problem, and the strategy of the other manufacturers has been add more battery to get more range, and then you need a heavy charging infrastructure to make sure people can charge within their daily lives comfortably. We do it the other way around. So right now, our car is exclusive and expensive because we are going to produce a low volume. Our next car that we want to deliver can already get to a price point of 30,000 euros because we have this relatively small battery, and because we don't need the infrastructure, we can scale up quite fast worldwide. So we can deliver clean mobility in places where there's no infrastructure yet. And because it's also so efficient, that the operating costs of this car are very low, and you get like 75% of your energy just from the sun. It's completely free and clean. So our end goal is to deliver a car that is will have a cost price of 10 cents per kilometer, including everything. And we believe that, for example, shared vehicles can play a big role in making clean mobility accessible for everyone, because you split the cost of the purchase price over a lot of people, and then when you have a car that's very low in cost per kilometer, you can get people in cars that they would otherwise never be able to purchase. And personally, for me, I see this as a way to provide people social mobility, especially in the developing countries. When you have access to electricity, when you have access to mobility, that will increase your economic opportunities. So yeah, for me, the end goal is very much social.
Okay, thanks. Because of course, things and plans won't fly if we just focus on the elite. They should become affordable, and especially if cities say we would like to have a zero emission or CO2 emissions totally set aside in cities by 2030. That can only really work when everyone has the opportunity to contribute, and not just the exclusive ones, so to say. Well, that brings me a little bit also to the question of how to empower entrepreneurs, as in to give them an opportunity to be part of this broader ecosystem. Because of course, the entrepreneurs can't just do it by themselves. And surely, Mariana, I know that is exactly what you're doing, right? It's not just making students into entrepreneurs, but also to connect them to the right people, to the right organizations, industries, and so on. So surely, could you give me some examples of how you help those entrepreneurs to team up with industry, but also perhaps with local governments to ensure that their plans will have some takeoff?
Right. So we have, I'm trying a few avenues because first of all, I must say we don't take students to our accelerator. Students go and study at the Entrepreneurship Center. The accelerator takes already those that finished school. I use, first of all, I believe in collaboration, and the EVP program is one of them. We have additional collaborations in Europe with other accelerators, and we have collaborations in the US and in the Far East. And of course, in-house with the Entrepreneurship Center, they have a lot of programs that help us empower our entrepreneurs. I'm myself a serial entrepreneur, so and coming from the technical angle. So I remember the path I did 21 years ago when I started my first company, and I know what they go through. And so I'm trying to help them in this respect. The other resource that we have to help them is our alumni, Technion alumni. We have them in Israel, we have them all over the world, and I get a lot of support from them, a lot of help. They want to come back home, they want to help, they want to contribute back to the institute that brought them where they are now. And so all these resources help us do the collaborations and empower our entrepreneurs, connect them with customers, with investors, and so on.
Thank you. So that's a really broad network, and something you hear quite often, that the alumni network should not be underestimated, because those people end up in places where, well, your type of entrepreneurs can already benefit from what they have experienced before. Marianne and Anders, how do you see it? Because you're part of the same kind of innovation ecosystem, I would say, where university and the city of Lingi collaborate together. So can you make it a little bit more concrete how valuable this collaboration is, and also especially to those newborn entrepreneurs?
Is it me you're asking?
Yes, Marianne, sorry. Yeah, please.
Absolutely. I was just going to mention how important a local government, local governmental institution can be, like a municipality. At least here, I mean, it's they have a lot of responsibility for construction, sustainability, mobility, and social. And so they take care of the elderly. They have all the schools. They have, they have this whole ecosystem just outside the university campus. And it's important that they have political ambitions, but also that they actually influence the government, including the EU, to get proper standards so that entrepreneurs know how to innovate and where they can contribute. And we have a super good example where our local municipality has taken the lead in Denmark. They have established a relationship to a distributor of goods only based on electric vehicles. And they actually have even trucks that are EV trucks. And they have constructed a storage in the outskirts of the city, and now they get all the goods delivered there. And then only once a week they are actually delivered downtown where the city hall is, and in an EV, and it's outside of rush hours. And they've been doing that for a year and a half. And now we looked at the partnership, and we have encouraged a lot of our members that are based downtown to actually look at, like, what deliveries are we getting every week? Can we actually just redirect them to go to that storage? And that way we have reduced about 40 trucks daily out of the city center. A lot of reduction of CO2 and NOx and whatever. But it was the municipality that actually took the lead. And that encouraged a lot of the other companies locally to say, well, do we actually need to have these deliveries every day or twice a day? Could we actually just redistribute the goods and get them at another time?
Exactly.
So that you can do locally if you and share knowledge, you have a lot of muscle.
It's such a nice example, and also comes back to the point made at the beginning by Commissioner Breton, who actually said we need to link up to the local ecosystem. I mean, the thinking is rather European or global, but indeed it needs to happen locally. Anders, what is your experience regarding this ecosystem approach from the university perspective?
I would say that from a university perspective, I completely agree with what Charly and Marianne have also said here, that it is collaboration that is important. I think the whole idea here really is, and maybe that's even the best thing about working with entrepreneurship and innovation, that it is not a one-person game. It's a game where you need to work together, where you need to collaborate, where you gain respect of other professions also. And I think that's exactly what communities can do also. They can open the doors and create those connections that we don't have in advance. And maybe that's the best thing. I myself also, as Charly, have had some personal experiences that goes 20 years back or something like that. But I think what I remember most strongly from those days was really the benefit of collaborating with other professions, the pleasures of doing things together. They were actually, in my memory, that becomes much stronger than really what we were doing specifically in those days. That was also fun, but this is really, really important. Working together.
Great, indeed, working together. And then finally, Tessie, because Anders just mentioned communities can open and close doors. If I remember correctly, you had a kind of tough discussion with the municipality whether they could at least facilitate you in order for you to stay.
Yeah, so if you want to build electric vehicles, you need quite some space, much more than just an office space. Which of course for a small young startup is expensive, and so the municipality was initially very willing to have us and very willing to help us, and we grew out of our office space quite fast. And then we mentioned but we need the bigger, like the facilities, otherwise we cannot start doing small tests, we cannot start delivering minimal viable products, etc. But you are at a phase where you are still with, I don't know, 10 people and a coffee machine. So they need to believe you in order to make things happen. So we were struggling a little bit with that until there was a public meeting with the mayor, and we just took the liberty to have some speaking time there. And then we said, look, this is really going to happen. And if you're not going to help us, we need to move. And it was true. It wasn't even a threat, but we needed to push a little bit to get the ball rolling, and it turned out very well, I must say.
Happy to hear that. Yeah, and we don't have time to have any further discussion, but of course, the aim of that is also to keep you as 𝐻𝐻𝐸 within Europe, because we don't want you to disappear to other continents. Where of course support and take on every opportunity to keep the promising companies and the entrepreneurs with the good ideas in Europe, and indeed ecosystems can facilitate that. Two final points I would like to make. One statement made in the chat is that definitely there's someone also from the Technical University of Eindhoven happy to reach out to you, which has some plans on intelligent lighting, looking for collaborations. So not just you, the panelists, but I think also all the other participants in this webinar, he's reaching out to you to seek some collaboration. And then finally, to wrap it up, I'd also like to know from your side, in one word, how to best empower entrepreneurs for a sustainable future. In one word. Tessie.
I would say deliver.
Deliver. Charly.
Mentoring.
Anders.
Social.
Marianne?
Network.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for your contribution to this panel. Really enjoyed it. Keep up the great work, and we'll definitely stay in touch. So thank you once again. So ladies and gentlemen, we are now switching to the final session of today, which is about fueling the technological sovereignty of Europe. And as you know, the world has gone digital with really a breathtaking speed, not in the least now spurred also by the COVID-19 crisis. I think this webinar is also a product of that, of what we are capable of still being able to have a proper discussion with you and to keep the policy discussions ongoing. But also it has become very clear, I would say, that Europe has become quite dependent on other continents, where we, as Breton already said, have identified a couple of vulnerabilities. And of course, we would need to see how to tackle those kind of vulnerabilities. And perhaps an answer to that is to really gain some technological sovereignty. So I think it would be nice to discuss this with the participants in this final panel. And we would be happy to hear from the four panelists that we have on board here. And again, we would like to have them to make 2-minute statements. And the first one I'd like to ask to make a statement is Robert-Jan Smits, the president of Eindhoven University of Technology. Robert-Jan, are you there? Yes, Robert-Jan, yes, you're back and I can see you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Great.
So happy to have you on board, Robert-Jan, and I'm looking forward to your contribution.
Well, first of all, it's a great topic, designing a resilient Europe. And also, I think it's crystal clear, and also the previous panel discussions have shown it, that we can only in Europe become much more resilient through cooperation. And we need really more than ever before, between the 27 member states, between our universities, between our institutions, to step up the cooperation. Because I always say, where Europe gets its act together and we are cooperating, we are unbeatable. If you look for fundamental research at CERN, if you look for applied research at Airbus, why are we not doing this in other areas? Why are we, for a topic like 5G, dependent on a third country? While we have all the knowledge in-house in our continent, we have all the people in-house. So my opening statement is that if we want to design a more resilient Europe, let's step up the cooperation on key strategic areas like the ones I mentioned. I believe that Europe has all the potential to become more resilient. And let's not forget, with 7% of the world population, we still are providing 1/3 of the world's knowledge. So we are still a global player in the field of science and innovation. And let's make sure through cooperation that we reinforce our resilience. This is just my opening statement.
Thank you. I think that's a very strong opening statement to just again reiterate the importance of collaboration. Thank you so much. The second one I'd like to ask to take the floor is Eric Labaye, the president of the École Polytechnique. Eric, can you hear me?
Yes, and do you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you. Looking forward to your contribution.
Okay, great, because I was checking the connectivity. So my 2 minutes. It's about sovereignty. It's about competitiveness. I want to make sure that when we think sovereignty, it's not about closing the borders. It's about having technology competitiveness in Europe, which means being able to shape the future of our society by mastering the key technologies. We have 4 revolutions going on: one in digital, one in energy, one in healthcare, one in materials. And the objective of sovereignty is to be able to master the key components of these different revolutions to make sure we can address the key issues society is facing, and that in Europe we can continue to develop a great way of living. For that, we need to have one digital market. We need scale. Basically, scale is the issue here, or the rule of the game. We have the skills, but we need the scale, leveraging the market, leveraging the investment. I know Commissioner talked about that. Leveraging also the ecosystem of innovation. So in that context, also the second idea I would like to discuss is about the value chains.
And I think we just lost connection with Eric. So I'd like to switch, and I'm sure he'll come back in a second. I'd like to switch to Regina, because Regina, I think you are online, right?
I think, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Happy to have you on board as well. And ladies and gentlemen, Regina is the Managing Director of Interlab at Merck in Israel. So Regina, I'm looking forward to your input.
Okay, so for a few years, we know that the future of science and technology is the courage to embrace what is unknown over there. And this we can do by collaborating and partnering. I think diversity is very important for research today. And I'm really happy of what Merck is doing in Israel. And I am happy to share with you all this in this panel.
Okay, thank you so much. And Regina, if I may ask you straight away, just as a general input as well, we're talking about Europe's technological sovereignty, but I'm sure you can make a comparison also with what you experience in Israel compared to Europe itself. So could you comment on that?
Yes, of course. So yes, I am. With 25 years of experience, I think I have some solid understanding of what are the differences. I think differences are very important, though, and can bring benefits, but we have to be aware of the differences and to be aware of that being different doesn't mean that we do better, but it means sometimes that we complement each other. And the way I worked with my Swiss colleagues or my German mother company for the last 20 years is that we have different approaches of how bring things to market for sure, and we are not perfect for sure either. But what Europe is, I think, is lacking today is take risks much faster, much with a kind of hunger that we have in Israel. This is different. We are very agile. We are very fast. But it doesn't mean that we can do things alone, not at all. And collaboration are really well welcome. So we need to have to feel this proactiveness in Europe, the hunger to have collaborations, the way we work with others, and understand the differences. I think in that, and I think also that I'm not sure how much Europe is bringing industry into the academia. You know what I want to say? We are doing that in Israel with a lot of success. And academy today is not what it was a few years ago. We need to combine what is in the ecosystem, which is very strong industry expertise today in all the fields, and we need to work together.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for this contribution already, and I'm happy to take that question on board later on and have the European, so to say, to reflect on this statement that you're making, that industry should be really brought into academics much more. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't see Erik and Peter. We had some technical difficulties, but Erik, I understand you're there by phone, right?
Albert, I am there by phone. It's Peter here, if you can hear me.
Yes, so Peter, indeed, I can hear you. Then I will be asking Peter first to make his contribution. So Peter, happy to have you on board. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter is the Director of Prosperity at DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission. So Peter, we're happy to have you.
Thank you, Charlotte. So am I. I'm a bit disappointed. I wanted to be on screen. I put on my best tie for you, but I failed. So my opening statement, let me build on what Robert Jan Smits, my former Director General, by the way, said. He said we need to step up cooperation. I entirely agree, and I think when it comes to technological sovereignty for Europe, we need to think wide. The heads of state and government have just linked the industry policy to reducing dependencies of Europe. Here we talk about reshoring and nearshoring in order to become more competitive, more green, more sustainable. And my plea here, we need is we need to think wide. We need to think wide in terms of scope of technological sovereignty. It's not just about defense. It is not just about IT. It is certainly about health. We know that. It is certainly also about all the societal challenges, starting with climate change, but also sustainable manufacturing or flexible manufacturing. In that sense, I think there's a strong link with solidarity and technological leadership. Secondly, we need to think wide in terms of scope of technologies, talking about sensors, materials, not only just computing power. We're talking about data storage, about manufacturing, I mentioned it, about flexibility and adaptability. And thirdly, we need to think wide in terms of stakeholders. It's companies, it's RTOs, research and technology organizations, and it's universities, technical universities, starting with technical universities, but academia in general. And here I entirely agree with Regine. Our best successes in European cooperation come from projects where we have a cooperation of academia and industry. I stop here.
Thanks, Peter. And I think the approach that you mentioned is really to think wide, and we'll come back to some of those points that you have made for sure. Eric, let me see. Are you on the phone?
Yes, I am on the phone because
okay, thank you. I think
on and off on video, so I'm still trying, but let me use the phone, easy way
it's
to connect.
It's okay like that. I think we lost you at how to scale, so you can take it from there.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So yeah, I was saying, in fact, to be competitive, I think there is a question of scale, and Europe basically needs to broaden its scale. Both in terms of investment, and I'm sure we'll come back on that, in terms of research and capital investment. Second, in terms of its ecosystem. And third, in terms of leveraging its market. We have 500 million consumers in Europe, so the unique digital or unique market is absolutely critical to allow the investment. And the last point I wanted to make, which is to gain this competitiveness, also value chains are critical. And leveraging the most recent technology, Industry 4.0, and all the components of that, to ensure we can basically have the right value chains for the product and services of the future in Europe, is now absolutely critical, because through that, then we can master basically the future of our society, address the critical questions, and produce services and products that will be competitive and allow us to get a good future.
Thanks, Eric, for your contribution as well. Points have been made and well noted. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to urge you once again, please send in your questions. We're really, really happy to take them on board. Well, I think I'd like to first discuss, especially with Robert-Jan and Eric, as presidents of technical universities, the statement that Regine made. Yeah, well, European industry, super important, but it needs to find its way better into academia. This is not really, really successful. So Robert-Jan, may I ask you first, what is your reaction, your reply to that? And perhaps you have a concrete example where you would say that your university works really well into bringing industry on board.
Well, I mean, it's of course, for me in particular here in Eindhoven, at the Eindhoven University of Technology, something which is now genes, the cooperation with industry. We have been created, this university, by Philips, by Shell, and by DAF trucks, in order to educate engineers and to develop knowledge for the industry. So we are completely integrated in this innovation ecosystem here in Eindhoven called Brainport. And the participation we have with the big companies, but also the smaller high-tech companies in the region, is of course, completely enshrined in our genes. So I could not agree more with what was said, this statement. And I think the challenge is not so much for the University of Technology. And if I look at the members of EuroTech, they are reaching out to industry. They are part of the innovation ecosystems. I think it's mainly the more general universities who still have a long way to go.
Okay, yeah, but again, if you say that the general universities have a long way to go, then I think what we've already seen today during this webinar, this social component has become even more important. So especially now there's a role for them as well then to team up with industry so that we can ensure that what has been invented or come about within industry together also with technical universities also ends up in society with help of those general universities, so to say.
Absolutely, that's full complementarity. We're all partners. I mean, that is crystal clear. We are all partners because we don't have departments on sociology. We have a few psychologists, but not that many. So the partnering with, of course, the general universities is obvious to ensure, of course, the embedding of the technology in society.
Okay, thank you. Eric Labay, do you have something to add here as well from your university perspective?
Yeah, maybe a couple of points I would make. The first one is I fully agree that now pluridisciplinarity and interdisciplinary research is critical to solve the most important issues. We see it in AI, we see it in energy, and therefore it's very important to have deep collaboration between departments in university or between universities. Let me just take an example. We have created at École Polytechnique and Institut Polytechnique de Paris 2 interdisciplinary centers, one around energy for climate, the other one around AI and data science. And for both of them, we have done that with partners. For example, in AI, it's called High Paris, and we have done that with the management school next door, HEC, obviously well known, but it's together, from, I would say, pure math research to management through all the other disciplines in order to provide basically the right perspective, the right skills, and then to train basically our engineers or our managers with the right profiles. And here I would add another point, which is, executive education or, training throughout life is very important too, which is one of the challenge is not only the graduates out of universities, but also the retraining, the reskilling, which right now is at a different scale than 10 years ago. And this is where also we have obviously something to play, something to do that we are doing. But again, scale is going to be important because we have millions of people that have to be reskilled to be, able basically to contribute and to shape the value chains of the future, or the services of the future.
Exactly, and that's why this component of lifelong learning is something that comes back every time. And I think we've also heard from Commissioner Breton as well, but also from Lina, the member of the European Parliament, that we need this kind of basis, right? And the basis continues throughout life, that without education, without fostering the talents and the creative ideas, we're lost. And then we can have as many plans as we like, but it will become very, very difficult. Peter, I'd like to come to you. Because you clearly stated we need to think wide. What you've also said, okay, we need to think about a broader scope also in terms of tech sovereignty. But I'm sure, Peter, we can't do everything, right? We need to make choices also regarding our value chain, regarding what is strategic and what is not.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps I can give one example how we do that under Horizon Europe, the framework program for research and innovation, the forthcoming. We had co-created a strategic plan with 4 key strategic orientations distilled from all the wide discussions we had with policymakers, with member states, with the European Parliament, with researchers, with companies. And from this, we are distilling the priorities we need in order to invest with the highest impact. And we had this kind of strategic planning before, but we have now brought it to a higher level and a more dynamic level as well. And you hear we put this under the overarching objectives of the Commission and the EU of this twin transition, green and digital, towards resilience in the recovery. So with that, I think that is one key element for prioritization. The second one is to look into what is an enabling or a general purpose technology, not to be too specific at the European level because our investments are medium to long term.
Very clear. Thank you so much. I think Robert-Jan, you looked like you would like to comment on that.
No, I think what Peter said is spot on. And I'm not surprised because I know him quite well, and he's a very strong leader, notably in pushing the key enabling technologies. So I'm very happy to see that Peter is consistent with his previous policy, which is rock solid, and I think needs to get a lot of support.
Exactly, and we just got a comment in also from Harold Weffers in the Q&A, and he also mentioned, and I think that is in line with what Peter said, we should not focus on projects so much more anymore, but really on strategic objectives and strategic investments that we should make. Regina, a question to you, because we've talked before, and you said, well, basically the ideal combination wedding relationship is the tech side of Europe, but also the agility of Israel. So could you elaborate a bit on what you mean by this agility of Israel, where Europe could learn a lesson, perhaps?
Well, I'm always saying that we have learned a lot from Europe and from US for sure. I mean, I think what we have, and it's not possible to have it everywhere, is based on a survival mode and a lack of resources. So, you know, when you have what you have, so you have to play with what you have. And we have a brain, and what we are doing is now more and more is to find the partners. You know, Europe has a big tradition in technology and science, to find the right partner that can take these agile teams from here with a lot of ideas and just plan with them what are the market, what are the gaps, what is the strategy for the new innovation field that we can, you know, tackle. And it's going very well. You can see here with the AI and the automotive space, it's really booming. We are doing now AI in pharma, which is also starting. I think we are working here also with the government. I'm not sure everywhere in Europe it is the same. I don't talk about these huge programs. I'm talking about very specific program, how we help startups here. It's very, we have an ecosystem that is really giving a lot of support, mentoring, coaching, funding for startups. I can tell you that we have something around 1,000 just in biotech startups currently. So it's a lot for such a small country. So the awareness of that we need to work with someone who has strong and solid experience, and we, with this kind of hunger, give all the best that we can to new areas of development, and not to be afraid to fail. No, not to be afraid. I think this is something in the European culture that needs to be reviewed. We need to be ready to fail, because otherwise it's science and technology. It's not possible to do it in a fast way and be in the market on time with new drugs, with new, I don't know, new other technologies. So I have a lot of experience, and when I go back to the element of involvement of industry and academia, it's not just to say it, you know, that we are doing that, is just really to involve the industry and academia, really to do, not to be afraid to have background IP and joint IP, and even without IP, I mean, not be afraid to share what we can. And these are the most successful projects.
Thank you, and that's the open innovation approach that you kind of live and breathe at Merck in Israel, right? I think we've discussed that before, but I'm sure also within the technical universities that we have on board here, that is something important as well. Robert-Jan, you already mentioned Brainport, for example. It has very much a sharing culture, right? You're not afraid to share your ideas with the broader community.
Exactly.
On the contrary, and just to react, I think Israel is of course a fantastic showcase. They call it Startup Nation, And I'm always flabbergasted by the creativity and the entrepreneurial spirit of the Israeli researchers, and the number of startups is very impressive. Indeed, in Brainport, in the Eindhoven region, we have this in-depth cooperation. We can, of course, learn a lot from Israel, generate more startups, because I think the challenge which we have, notably in the Brainport region, is not to make companies like Philips, NXP, and ASML bigger, but to create more Philips, to create more ASMLs, and to create more NXPs. That is the challenge. And we are going to focus that, we're going to give much more attention to that, to the whole startup scene in the Eindhoven region, because the potential is there. There's so much creativity at the Eindhoven University. You can't imagine, if I look at students or I look at researchers, how much creativity there is. Give these people the room to really, you know, become entrepreneurs, or to get in touch with the people who can help them to become entrepreneurs. I think that will be the main challenge which we have in our university here in the Brainport region.
Exactly, and that they have a fair chance to do so, and that they're not being eaten by the GAFAs, so to say, like the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of this world, but that they really have a role to play themselves.
That we also, you know, allow them to fail. That I think was a very good statement. I mean, failing is seen in Europe still as something which is not nice on your CV, on your resume. But in countries like Israel, the United States, I mean, you're only credible when you have failed 3 times and then become president of the United States.
Exactly. Exactly. So it does take a certain mindset, but this is very much also an anthropological, psychological aspect, and there we need to general universities as well to help us to build a new kind of mindset. I'd like to come back to this sharing culture, and Eric and Peter, I'd like you to reflect on that. Of course, there's a willingness to share, but I'm sure there's also kind of like a limit to what you share, for example, with the US, with Asia, in terms of that our strategic positions are being taken over by other continents. So, Eric, how do you deal with that at the institutional level?
I think we should maybe decompose in a couple of issues. The first one is, I think the academic research is global, and I think there is no doubt about that. It's the way it has been going on, and it should continue. And from that standpoint, the network of research is absolutely global, depending on the topics. You know, the labs have known each other; they continue to work together, and from that standpoint, there is a sharing basically of the research that is going on. And frankly, for me, it's a source of growth and progress. Then the second issue is how do you get to technologies and you go to product, and this is where I think it's very important to have similar rules basically between countries. So that's obviously a role of the Commission, obviously of the EU, to ensure, and from some of the multilateral organizations to ensure this happens. And from that standpoint, I think obviously each of us in universities, in research labs, are very not only cautious but very clear on how do we ensure intellectual property, how do we ensure return on innovation. And this usually is basically an attention of every day in the labs. But then, obviously, for that, as I mentioned, you need some scale. This is where also European universities and the EuroTech network we have built allows us also to work with trust on some of these topics and get to new ideas, new products, new services. So it's I would decompose it along these dimensions and being very clear also at every stage about the competitive dimension or the sharing dimension that is different depending on the stage.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very clear input. Peter, what is your take on that? How far should we go in terms of sharing? You already talked about data storage, for example. Do we want to share data with the rest of the world? What about our strategic value chains? I'm happy to have your view on that.
Thank you. First of all, I fully agree with Eric's structuring and distinction of different elements and of research and results. Our approach is quite interesting now due to COVID. EU-funded research every result generated is owned by the beneficiaries. And we want them to play with it and go big with it. But for COVID-related research, we have changed the approach, and we have started a new phase of sharing results to solve the pandemic, which requires global answers as quickly as possible. And we have excluded exclusive licensing. And actually, they've started an initiative asking our beneficiaries voluntarily to commit to royalty-free licensing. And I mean, we've been quite surprised. I personally have been very surprised by the positive response. More than 2,000 institutions and researchers have signed up to this. So there's a new culture of sharing. This doesn't mean naivety. So we also have now new rules which allow us to, as Commission, to object to the transfer of knowledge outside of the EU if that is not in the interest of the EU. So I think it's clear we have to, and this is linked to the question of technological leadership or sovereignty, we need to be able to develop the leadership, to keep it, to source from others. So it's very much about cooperation, but not about giving it out for free naively. And data is a specific field you mentioned. Perhaps just one word of this. We are creating these European data spaces, also for manufacturing, where sharing requires particular rules. You need to know how to make sense of the data, ontologies. We need to develop these. We need to build up platforms, and these need to be secure, that they cannot be accessed by those who should not access them.
Exactly. So we need these kind of secure structures. Thanks, Peter, for that input. And ladies and gentlemen, we have almost already come to the end. And a final question to all panelists. I'd like to know, well, globally, we have become so intensely interwoven. So I'd like to know from you, can Europe still become technological sovereign? Is that still possible? Eric?
Yes, with speed and scale.
With speed and scale, thank you. Robert-Jan?
Well, as long as it does not lead to a breakdown of cooperation across the globe. The fact that others break down the multilateralism and the global cooperation should not mean that we should do it. So I agree that we need, as Europe, to be perhaps a bit less naive, work on technological sovereignty, but let's really keep the value of cooperation at global level high in our flag, and let's continue fighting for that. So in other words, the fact that others break down multilateralism should not mean that we should break it down.
Okay, so we need to stay faithful to our own kind of values and norms. Regine?
I don't know really what to think about that. What I can say is that if we continue to work every continent by themselves, I mean, and playing with the IP everywhere, IP security and so on, we will have hard times, because I think we know the competition in the East is very strong, and we need to be fast, as you said here, speed, to be able to bring benefit and value to the society. I mean, that is more important than all the other things.
Yeah.
We can think.
Wonderful. Peter, the final word is for you.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Robert-Jan. Cooperation, we need to have trusted partners. As EU, we have all it takes to establish these partnerships. And while having more attention to develop our own capabilities, we also need to keep open and cooperate with the best trusted partners around the globe.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think in that sense, we also have a kind of an answer to a final question I just got in. how to spend the extra 15 billion of the EU budget. Well, if I listen to you, this is definitely going into these kind of collaborations on speeding up, scaling up the technological basis and expertise that Europe has, and take that on board.
But also be clear, it's only 4 billion in addition for Horizon Europe.
Exactly.
So it really falls short of all the ambitions the Commission heads and the European Parliament had. So let's be crystal clear, out of the 15 billion now agreed upon, only 4 will go as top up to Horizon Europe, which is of course far too little. Horizon Europe had deserved much more.
Exactly. So I think it is definitely time to further step it up and to show as academia and industry what you're capable of, so that at least then in the next term there will be much more funding available. Robert-Jan, Regine, Peter, Eric, thank you so much for your participation in this panel. Really enjoyed it. Keep up the good work. Happy to keep in touch. Thank you once again for your collaboration. And ladies and gentlemen, we were very happy to have you on board as well. Thank you so much for participating. And I think it's quite clear what we've discussed today. Cooperation remains immensely important for Europe to be resilient and to get out of the crisis in a very positive way. We need to focus on ecosystems, but also next to sustainability and the greening and the digitalization of our economy, we should definitely focus on the societal and social dimension as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, a final remark from my side. I'd like to wish you a good evening. Please stay safe, stay healthy in those times, and perhaps in the future there will be an opportunity to see each other face to face again. So thank you very much and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.